Okay, so I had some channeled messages come through today about the world and the state of the world and what to expect. And these messages are coming from Lord Melchizedek. And he first wanted me to start with the image of a very long uh, band of dolphins that are along the Gulf Coast facing the United States. He's talking about how this imagery represents um, the energy they are putting out to communicate to the souls of the people. He was referencing how the dolphins that had been released in Mexico, he said this isn't by accident and there are more to come, more batches of like releasing to come. He's talking about how the dolphins, the highest grade of intelligence, and they have the ability to communicate with the soul of people. And so, although the dolphins themselves, okay, he's saying not you might not be in front of them, that the echo carries out, and he's showing me this long band of dolphins lining up facing the United States. And they're sending these echoes of higher frequency energy out to assist humanity. He said what they're sending out is in their high vibration is like signals to humans of preparing their hearts for some of the more difficult dynamics coming. He's just saying you all felt the shift, especially like in the new year with the Aries energy and Neptune moving into Aries. He says, and don't forget about Pluto in Aquarius and the 14-year cycle right there. He said, we are beginning a new journey and we all need to be prepared. He says, there are two things happening here. One is the upgrading of Mother Gaia, and two is the eradicating of the dark beings that came here, made their presence known. He is referencing in like more ancient times, he said, before the fall of Atlantis, upon their arrival here, that there would have been experimentation done on humans for power and control and the genetic modification of in the cellular level. He's saying, but don't forget that the God essence, the God cell lives within you all. And so that is what is being brought back. But in doing so, we are attempting to eradicate these, he says, whatever you want to call them, demons, dark entities, extraterrestrial beings. But the main point here is that they came here long ago, and he's talking about have resided under the crust. And he says, and that's what we are going to focus on today and what you need to be aware of. And so if you are a light worker listening to this, he says, listen up, know that you are validated and that we are all in this together in a team effort. And so he goes back to the dolphins right now, and he wants me to talk about the imagery I received of like an oil spill coming off of the ghost. And he says this is not actual oil, but this is a reference of energy. And he's talking about black oil kind of coming into the ocean, and the dolphins are there, and they're ready to, he says, like go up against it. And he says this is what we are looking at energetically when we speak of the substance, the dark essence of oil in this like imagery context he's giving me. He's saying that represents the dark entities that have, he says, think about oil under the earth. He says that is exactly what I'm talking about. These beings under the earth crust they're ooey gooey, right? He's referencing oil in terms of that. And we are eradicating them. He says this was never their home to begin with. Even, he's referencing, even in me making this video, there were many attempts of blocking this video going out, and I feel a very big sense of urgency. He says it's time for all of you, he's listening, to be the spiritual warriors of the Christ consciousness that you have been called to, and know that we are working on a team effort together. And so he's wanting me to move down my list here. He goes to number 2 now. He says, when we look at the U.S., he says, yes, there's a lot of activity, and he says in coming times we will talk about civil war. But right now that is secondary compared to what is happening, he says, in Japan. And he was showing me that, he's like showing me a double-sided coin. And he says this is twofold. He says on one side of the coin, you see government officials, leaders. He says one leader with a large following who are facing outward. It looks like they're facing if we're in Japan, they're facing the West, and they're sending these messages and intentions out of trying to get countries nearby to be a part of war. He says World War III, and he says in doing this leader is threatening goods. He's threatening to withhold goods. He's threatening fear. And he said, when we look at the coin, that's one side of it. People, humans. He said, but do not mistake that these humans, on the other side of the coin that we do not see, is a very dark entity. Now, when he talks about dark entities, he's saying that this one in particular, underneath Japan, would be one that is like a leader of entities, of beings, a leader of these dark beings. And he does reference 3, and 1 Japan, but there's, I keep seeing 3 total that communicate. But then he's showing me under the ground in Japan. And he says they've resided there, and I heard operations. I keep hearing underground operations, and we are talking about the taking of bodies, the taking of people, and he draws a line and connecting underground Japan all the way to underneath the Vatican. And he's saying they communicate in this line of travel, and do not mistaken, it is a taking of bodies. And great darkness. He said, but this is being exposed. He says, not just by me and what I'm channeling, but by others. And he says, so we are bracing ourselves, because when we attempt to expose the truth of these ones here, there is a pushback. But I'm here to tell you, light workers, to band together. Those of you who are not necessarily light workers but reside here, I bring this message forth to tell you to hold your ground and do not lose hope and do not live in fear. Yes, there is about to be a big upheaval, but this always occurs right before the recreation of, he's talking about Gaia, the recreation of Gaia, Mother Earth, and eradicating the beings that were not meant to be here and what we have done to the planet. So he wants me to go back to Japan for a minute. And when I was seeing Japan, he took me into a conference room where I did see like a white male, came in to a conference room, and Melchizedek was showing me, he says, we are sending protection out to those who are coming into Japan to talk with face to face this leader and others in government. He said, and in this conference room, I saw a camera. I see a camera right now with like a teleprompter, and he's talking about it being caught on camera, meaning he's saying, I want you all to see this for what it is. It is not just a leader. It is the entity backing the leader. And so when he talks about that, he's referencing the eyes. He's referencing what some of you know as reptilians, dark entities, and that this one coming in, not just one, but there will be a few, they're being guided by Christ consciousness to expose what is really occurring here, and to, he said, soften the blow, meaning he says we are making every attempt to put on pause the attempts of war and to soften the blow in protection of humanity. And he says it is very important that this is exposed. He says he's talking a lot to light workers right now, and he's saying, what is this? Oh, I understand. He's talking to like what would be like newer light workers who think, okay, he tells me to talk about myself in this context of when I started channeling, at first I thought, am I crazy? Like, how is it possible I'm seeing these things or hearing these things? But I know in my soul they are true. I know it to my core. And he's saying, for those of you who are new, just joining, he said, trust the inner knowing. He says, because, what is this? This builds a stronger team of light and love and pushing through these darker entities. Yeah. Okay. So, let's see what else he's saying here. He said at the core of this, there are many of you who are being called to rise up in the spiritual warrior energy in an attempt to protect the people. He said this is not just a spiritual battle. This is an earthly battle. He says the things of the unseen are going to be seen. He says physically seen. Yeah, let me see what else is here. Okay, he wants me to go on to the next one here. Okay. Got that. Okay. Then he showed me an image of the earthquakes happening between Japan and Russia. And he said, why do you think these earthquakes are occurring right here? He showed me then an image of like a young scientist who is looking at the printout sheet of the earthquakes and the intensity of the earthquake. And this man looks at it and he says, this isn't supposed to be happening in this location. He goes, it doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to be happening. And for those of you listening, you know full well what I'm talking about, he's saying, because you can see it over across the earth when we talk about man-made storms and the earthquakes and the hurricanes and the places that it should not be happening. He says, on one side of things, Mother Gaia is throwing up. On another side of things, there is a battle underground. And when this image of the scientist, he says actual scientist, looking at the earthquake record and the intensity, this, he talks about the scientist saying this shouldn't even be happening in this place, and he takes what he knows of his studies about earthquakes and he takes it to government. And there is a need here to look at physically, I heard the words excavate, underground, and see, he says, the tunnels underground and the operations underground, he said, and the taking of people. And so he said, this is being exposed and we are doing it right here, right now. And in many other contexts. Okay, he's talking to light workers. So please send out protection and healing over these ones who are doing this work in exposing this. And then he goes on to, okay, the last point. He says a bit more hopeful. He says, he wanted me to talk about the new earth. He does reference Revelation. He says the things that John saw is what I'm about to tell you. He's talking through me right now. He's talking about, okay, he says start with the bubble. Okay, so there will be a time when the air quality is distorted. And he talks about how that they, other beings in the cosmos, are assisting with the knowledge of this and with safety. And he said, and safety zones for the earth in years to come. And he's wanting me to first talk about the crystal. So, for those of you who know about Lemuria, it's not new to you that there was a lot of crystal work and how the crystals hold energy. And he says that this giant crystal actually underground in between, he said it would be close to pyramids. He said in between Japan and the Vatican, in the middle, there is a very large crystal underground. And when the image that I got of it was, it was very much looking like selenite, but it was ginormous, coming up from the earth, and it had jagged edges, and it was a power source. And as I looked at it, a beam of light came out from the top, and it went all the way up to the cosmos, and then it created what looked like a clear dome. And he's using the word membrane. He said protective layer that will help assist in the new world. He says people will come to these places for safety, Christ consciousness, and medical care. And he's talking about how before, so around the time of the flood, that these beings came in, these lower level entities came in from outside of our planet, and they took over, he says, the traveling system. So he's talking about, okay, like when I astroplane, I sometimes travel through a tube of light. And he says it's like that, like tubes of light, and then he references Edgar Cayce and Nikola Tesla and the work that they did in the magnetic field, the energy field, and how this increases, something about this increases travel. He says light body travel, traveling between dimensions. He says, well, we are taking it back. He says that's part of the battle here that you see, is that we are reforming and reconfiguring Mother Gaia back to her original state and taking back, he says, humans, meaning that he talks about humans as being like the Christ consciousness being in us, in our cells and our genetic makeup, but that was modified for power and control. He says the word Anunnaki, the darker ones, he said, and reptilian, okay? And he says, so we are taking all of this back, and our travel system. So the ways of something about this crystal underground would be a form of communicating or traveling. And he says we are interrupting the communication between the beings, like under Japan and under the Vatican. That he says that's just one strong location. There are more, but that's what is occurring right now. Let's see what else is coming up here. Yeah. He just says, be ready for enlightenment. He says, there are no more secrets. We are not keeping secrets. We never, he says, kept secrets. He said, we are exposing all. So, he says, so have the courage to be a part of the exposure and what you know to be true. He says, in the spiritual and the physical. And he says, may God be with you. And he bows. Yes. Yes. So, more updates to come. And peace and love to all of you.